Carrie Richardson Salter, someone so young to feature on Voices with Dementia. And you're the big sis to Brian Salter, who we featured earlier, right? You are big sis Carrie, right?
Actually, I'm baby sis.
You're the baby sis.
Baby.
Okay, you have the mature behavior, and so I just assumed you're the big sis because you kind of act like a big sis. That's all. My mistake, my bad. But I need to ask you, because you learned that you inherited this Alzheimer's gene. And Carrie, how old are you?
I'm 37.
You're 37, and when did you learn that you inherited this gene?
When I was 31 in 2012.
So you've been living with this for 6 years, and I'd like to know, how is it knowing that this is your legacy?
Well, honestly, I don't think about it a whole lot. I think it used to terrify me, and now because I'm considered asymptomatic still, like I don't look at it like I even have this disease.
So you're living a normal life, even though you've been labeled with this, with Alzheimer's, essentially, and in this rare form. Can you tell us briefly about it?
Well, it's dominantly inherited. It's you can have one of 3 of the dominant genes, and my family has the PSN1 gene, which I don't know the significance of it, but I know that in our family it's an earlier onset. So you can have early onset anywhere between 30s to 50s is considered.
So here you are at age 31 being told that you have inherited this Alzheimer's gene, and you are also a mom of 3 children. In fact, today, if you could, how old are your 3 children today?
My oldest is 17, Hannah's 17, Jacob is 16, and my baby, Riley, is 12.
Your baby. And as a mom, what is your feeling? I mean, do you have thoughts about their risk?
Well, their risk obviously is a 50% chance of inheriting the gene. And it is the reason that I do any type of advocating for it, is to hopefully help advance anything to where my kids will one day see a world without Alzheimer's.
And I had mentioned when I interviewed your brother earlier that when we say 50% risk, that does not mean of the 3 children that 1.5 of them will inherit this gene. It really means it's a coin toss for each child, 50-50 chance that each child will get this, will inherit this gene, or has already inherited it, but they do not go for well, actually, and I'm curious about this. Do children go in for testing? I mean, what is that an option?
So to answer the first part of the question, yeah, each child has 50% chance. I mean, you either get your mom's dad or your mom's gene or your dad's gene. It's just a coin toss, I guess. Yeah. Children, they will not test children under the age of 18. I don't think that they really think it's a great idea to test an 18-year-old, although my daughter wants to have it done at the age of 18. She's kind of like me in a sense where I don't like surprises. I want to know what's going to happen. I want to know what's going on. And she has she's very academic, and she knows what she wants to do and the field she wants to go into, and she wants to know if it's going to be worth it to travel down that road and spend 12 years of college just to not be able to enjoy the benefits from it.
I mean, if we may divert for a moment there and speak about your eldest daughter, she honors you and your family by deciding to pursue this higher level of education and all the way through a doctorate in the area of neurology, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, she's always been a smart girl, and she's always wanted to go into the medical field, I think. But she, out of the three of mine, she has been the most, how do I say it, into learning about the disease and the gene and the family history. And she's kind of taken it and run with it and become an amazing advocate herself. So, I mean, she's pretty awesome.
In fact, that's a great segue to one thing I'd like to talk about is your own advocacy, because here you are, you're based in Alabama. So I have labeled you as the Alabama Alzheimer's advocate. You are the AAA, and you are doing all sorts of, you have done advocacy work and you're continuing to do advocacy work. And I'd like you to talk about some of the things you have done. And then I'd like us to also mention what you and your daughter have planned next year in Italy. But I'd like to maybe close with that. In fact, we'll close with that. Share with us what you have done, what you are doing currently.
Well, what I have done in the past, I served as an ambassador for the Alzheimer's Association, a congressional ambassador here in Alabama for District 2, which just means that I would meet with my representative for District 2 and go to DC a couple times and meet with her there and advocate on Capitol Hill, which was pretty cool. And I guess doing that kind of led me to many things, because I ended up writing a letter to the editor of like my local newspaper, and that then got me another interview with one of the writers there, Kim Class, and she wrote this great story on me and the family and the gene, and it kind of blew up. So with that came hooking up with New Step out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and being a brand ambassador for them and getting to travel and speak about brain health and really cool things from that.
And tell us what New Step is. Briefly, what is New Step for those who don't know?
New Step is an all-inclusive recumbent cross-trainer machine for people with neuro disorders. So, spinal cord injuries, ALS, MS, any type of neuro, Parkinson's, and then, of course, Alzheimer's disease. They have a lot of these machines in assisted living homes, and it's really a neat little machine because it's basically anybody can use it.
Did they provide you with one, or are these something that's more for corporate purchasers?
Yeah, they did actually send me one.
Oh, good. And do you use it still?
Occasionally.
Okay. I didn't mean to put you on the spot with that. I was just curious. I mean, we buy these things or we get these things, and sometimes they stop serving a purpose for us for a while until we employ other strategies to keep in shape or keep active. So, and all right. And like I say, I want to come back to the Italy thing, and I think I'd like to close with that because that's just exciting. I'm really looking forward to that. and tracking your progress when you do that. So I've built enough anticipation about that in this interview. I'd like to continue with what you're doing, because since you discovered that you had inherited this gene, you and your brother volunteered yourselves to participate in these clinical studies and to be monitored annually. Is that right? It's every year that you go to a hospital setting or an assessment or someplace. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so initially Brian and I started off in the Diane observational study, and then I think 3 years into that for me, I then went to the trial unit, which I began on a trial drug, and the same one that he is on, called gantenerumab. I've been on it. I just finished my 5th year of being on gantenerumab or placebo. Hopefully it's an active drug. But so we have a home nurse. We both have a home nurse that comes and treatment, and that's once a month. And then every 6 months we'll have like the superhero nurse, Amy, who comes and does like our 6-month visit at home, and she does some of the psychometric testing and pen and paper testing, just stuff that we normally do in St. Louis on our yearly visit, we'll do here at the house with Amy, that nurse. So,
and you, I remember us mentioning that you're asymptomatic. In other words, you have this gene, but for all intents and purposes, you're normal. You're not exhibiting the signs of the gene. What does the study show?
Well, the study's not going to show me anything because it's a study, and they're not, my scans and stuff are not revealed to me. Nothing from this trial or the study is ever revealed to me.
How fair is that?
Well, I think I'm just a number to them when they're going through the research and gathering the data. So, but yeah, I guess, I'm still considered asymptomatic. Do I do things that I think that maybe is a little worrisome? Sure.
And may I ask what some of those things are? Because when you have, like, if I forget, Carrie, I just say, oh, I'm under stress. I have all these things that I'm juggling. I've just, okay. You have been given this label. So now it's a bit scarier. It's real, far more real for you. So what are maybe a couple of things that you find that you might say, it is the gene?
It's hard to say because I feel like it's stuff that I've done anyway for years. But I will tell you, the scariest, an incident that actually brought me to tears for me, and this has been some years ago, when my baby Riley was in, she was in 4th grade. I think she was in 4th grade. And I was working full time, and Jacob had soccer, and Riley had tutor after school. And the way I usually did it was the days that Jacob had soccer, I'd leave work, I'd go get Riley from tutor at the school, and then I would go and get Jacob from soccer from his school. And I guess Jacob didn't have practice that day, and so for some reason in my head, I got off work and I was like, oh good, I can go straight home. And then I got home, didn't even acknowledge the fact that there was no one there. I just started cleaning up a little bit. And then probably 15 minutes after I was home, I got a text from Riley's tutor, and it was like, hey, we're at the school. And I was like, oh my gosh, I left my kid, or I found my kid. So So I'm driving as fast as I can all the way across town to get to the school. And I pull up, and my daughter and the tutor they were sitting outside in front of the school. And I got out of the car and I just lost it. Like, just started crying. And I think it made Riley a little uncomfortable. But anyway, of course, the first thing Miss Thomasy said was, she's like, everybody does stuff like that. And I was like, I get it. But for me, it was like, I never forgotten my child, ever. And so anyway, that was really, my oldest daughter will say too, like, when we moved into this house a few years ago, we were coming back from somewhere, and I pulled into the driveway next to us, and she was like, Mom, this is not our house. And I was like, wait a minute, though, we literally had just moved in like that week. So but
and yet when I listen to you, I'm sorry, I laugh out of discomfort at the reality of this, and yet a PWAD, a person without dementia, would say, God, I'm just under so much stress. I just, we'd say, well, the houses look the same, or I wasn't thinking, or what have you. And yet these are the pieces that you put together that really reflect on the magnitude of where this disease will go.
Yeah.
Wow. And, you mentioned Riley, you mentioned Jacob, because Hannah, you say, she's taking the lead, she's taking an initiative, but Jacob and Riley, how are they reacting to Mom's diagnosis?
They I think after the initial, back in 2012, like when it was all so new, they were really scared because they didn't know what it was. And for me, the biggest thing for me, and people will say, oh, I don't want to tell my kids, they're too young. But for me, I was always, whether they wanted me to be or not, was going to be open and honest with them about what it was and what would happen, because I didn't have that growing up. When I was watching my father go through it, we didn't understand it, and we didn't talk about it. Nobody talked about it. And so I carried this burden inside me for years and years, and I basically grieved for my dad silently because there was nobody to talk to about it. And so I wanted to make sure my kids were educated on it and how they took that.
Back then, though, Carrie, not that it was, well, yeah, that was long ago, but back then, you guys really didn't know what you were dealing with, though, did you? I mean,
my mom had always told me, all she would say was, your dad has Alzheimer's disease. He's basically going to forget stuff, and he's going to eventually die. Well, in my brain, I'm thinking, like, every day that passed by, I was like, well, when is he going to die? I didn't know it was a long, long process.
You were how old? Because your father passed in his late 40s, right? 47?
Early.
Oh, 44?
He died one day after his 43rd birthday.
That's right. So you were how old?
Well, I was 15 when he passed away, but I was 7 when he was diagnosed.
So as a 7-year-old, very young, what a trauma I'm not going to even try to guess there, because, I've been in this field for 22 years, and it's changed so much in the time that I've been in this field. I would never dream that I would be talking to a person of your age, your youth, and your ability to even express yourself when I began working in this field. The people I worked with were diagnosed so late in their lives, and most of them were older, that they didn't even have the capacity to express themselves. I wrote a memoir about caring for my father, and he took this hardcover book in his hands and he said, Alzheimer's must be a pretty important subject that it has such a big book. And it was, it was a hardback book, maybe, 300 pages? But that was his reaction. He really didn't understand. He was aware that he lost capacity. But Carrie, he was 86 when he was diagnosed, and he too participated in clinical research studies. But he was 86. He was not 31 when he was diagnosed, as you are. So vast difference in these 22 years, and vast difference in understanding and in how we even treat people with Alzheimer's, which leads me then to ask you, in how we do treat people with Alzheimer's, because you've been given this diagnosis and you're public with it, right? Even though you're relatively asymptomatic, you're still public with it, right? I mean, most of the people in your circle know you have this disease, right?
Yeah, and I think for me, it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do is be open and talk about it. But I felt like people would look at me and think, okay, that's not right. I just wanted to be able to help break that stigma of what Alzheimer's is and who it affects.
So
it doesn't just affect people, it affects everybody.
Given that and how it affects the people who have been diagnosed and their families, I want to pre-close this interview before we talk about Italy. I want to ask you, what is your advice, twofold advice, to not only fellow people with dementia, we'll keep it open, dementia, Alzheimer's being the leading cause, and also, so we say the people with dementia, and then the PWODs, people like me who don't have dementia, so people without dementia. What is your advice to fellow people with dementia and people without dementia?
I don't even know how to answer that question, honestly. I think for people who don't have dementia and who are dealing with somebody with dementia, I think the key thing is you have to be very patient, which a lot of people aren't. I'm not a very patient person. And I think, I don't know. I honestly, because I've not been a caregiver.
You truly are the peanut butter between the two slices of bread, in the sense that your dad had dementia. You didn't know how to deal with that. Your mom helps you and your in in advocacy for Team Salter. You don't know yet if Hannah will have this gene, which means you'll not only be one who lives with this, but also having to be mom and maybe care partner. I would say better care partner than caregiver to your daughter as she lives with this gene. But I mean, what are some of the things, because people that show more of the symptoms are stigmatized, people who are labeled with this are stigmatized. Are you seeing any of that right now in your circle?
No.
Yes, that's good. I honestly don't want to force an answer where none should be. If truly, because I look at how you appear, how you're functioning, and like you shared with us earlier, it's those momentary lapses where you're failing, where that would happen to any of us. When I mess up driving someplace, I call it scoping the territory before I find a parking space. because I have not been diagnosed. Had I been diagnosed, then I might give it a different explanation. Then let us jump straight to next year and this wondrous goal. Tell us about what you and your daughter have planned.
Well, first and I want to brag on her a little bit some more, and I like to brag on all my kids, but Hannah, because she's the oldest and she's a senior, and she's, after this year, she's going to college. And so for years, we had been in contact with the youth movement against Alzheimer's, which was created, developed at UCLA in California by our friend Neil. And don't ask me to pronounce his last name because I'll never do it correctly. So I would hate to offend him by doing that.
I won't even ask you to spell it.
Didn't do that either. But he's amazing. I mean, he is brilliant and amazing, and he's doing really amazing things. But he has been, asking Hannah for years, when she wanted to start a chapter of the youth movement. And I guess since 8th grade, and I don't think that her freshman year was right. And anyway, so this past summer she decided that this year it was going to be the time, and she went through all the road work and all the whatever, and she is now the founder and president of her school's Youth Movement Against Alzheimer's chapter. So they've already had 2 meetings, and they're doing a fundraiser today at their school, and their team will be walking her school club. She has almost 30 members in the club, which is super cool. I mean, especially with high school kids. So.
Oh, yeah.
And she, I spoke at her school her freshman year with Dementia Friendly Alabama, and she wasn't even horrified. That was, so she's got this club going on, and she's got this full academic schedule her senior year, and so I'm very impressed with what she's doing.
So what are you guys doing next year?
Okay, we will be joining 28 other Alzheimer's and Parkinson advocates. We're gonna do a Camino. So we're gonna walk basically 110 or 112 miles through the island of Sicily. And basically it's a pilgrimage to the birthplace of healthcare. And I can't pronounce any of these cities.
That's okay. That's okay, because we want to leave this a mystery, and we'll post a link once you get the information, or you can post it once we post this to YouTube. Once you get that information, we can post it there. But this is so exciting. And when is this next year?
It'll be next June. So I believe it's going to be June 13th through the 23rd, which then I'll be celebrating my 38th birthday while in Sicily.
Wow.
But so what it is kind of a follow-up to the 10 Mountains, 10 Years project, which was a documentary that won a lot of 20-something awards, and they climbed a bunch of scary mountains.
Tall ones. Yes.
So I never got to be a part of that, and I would have loved to, but the time wasn't right. And so we were asked to go as a team duo, she and I. And we're going to be part of the feature of the sequel, I guess, to the 10 Mountain, 10 Years project. So it's called the Pilgrimage to Enlightenment. Wow. And they'll be filming, from now until then, and then along the way on the journey. And so it'll be neat. I'm excited.
Well, and our time has come to an end, and I do thank you as well, Carrie, for leading us on this pilgrimage to enlightenment on what it is to live with a rare inherited gene of Alzheimer's and how it does affect you, even though mostly right now you remain asymptomatic. I thank you for your advocacy, for your insights, and for taking the time to share with us today.
Oh, thank you.